Welcome to the Vet Med Wellness and Leadership Podcast, where we discuss central challenges vet med leaders face, such as burnout, stress, and difficult interactions with clients and staff, just to name a few. In each episode, you will hear about actionable solutions that you can apply to your practice and invitations to connect with fellow leaders who are passionate about improving the wellness of the vet med profession. By subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, you are helping more veterinary professionals find the resources shared in these episodes. Thank you in advance for listening and supporting this show. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, everybody. Crystal Stokes here, and my guest today is Dr. Ivan Zak, who is a veterinarian, an entrepreneur, and also a passionate advocate for the well-being of veterinary professionals. So he's had his own experience with burnout, having burned out as an ER vet. And now he wants to build an organization that would have burnout prevention by design. So he founded Galaxy Vets, which is what we're going to talk about today, a veterinary healthcare system that is co-owned by its employees. So Ivan takes a structured, evidence-based approach to burnout prevention. He conducts annual burnout studies to better understand the influencing factors on veterinary well-being. So Dr. Zak, thank you for being with us today.
That's quite an intro. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, as you know, burnout is very near and dear to my heart with veterinary professionals. I thought we could possibly start off with your origin story, how that happened to you and how that inspired you to create Galaxy Vets.
Yeah, well, let's start there. It's not sort of the happiest part of my life, but let's try that. As I graduated from Atlantic Vet College in Canada, I was passionate about ER. And one of the things that I was excited about is that ER offers this work-life balance and the lifestyle that I thought it would be amazing to have. So essentially, you make a little bit more money than the general practitioner. And then the way it was scheduled for me, I was supposed to be working 4 nights and then have 6 days off. And that sounded really awesome. So 10-day cycle, you work 4 nights, 6 days off, 4 nights, 6 days off. And I thought, that's awesome. I'll be living in British Columbia on the West Coast. I'd be able to travel, go to like Hawaii in 5 days and back. So it's really cool. And as many of us do, I ended up working 4 nights on and then 6 relief shifts off. Or on again, if you will, and then 4 nights on, and then again relief, and then again 4. And when you're younger and you're not really monitoring, you think you can take it. You make more money, and being in student debt and all that, you kind of keep pushing yourself to the limits, and that lasted about 6 years. Until I slowly disconnected from everything. And now that I'm learning more about the burnout, all the signs of burnout came to the surface, and to the degree where at the end, I just didn't care about anything that's going on in the hospital. I became really cynical. I couldn't care less. It didn't go away with vacation, which I think is sort of a pathognomonic kind of clinical sign of burnout. It doesn't go away, whatever you do. And it spiraled to a very, very dark place. And as I'm more comfortable to talk about it, but I ended up in committing suicide, which I was resuscitated from. And then I did it again. So that was sort of the experience. It's not that I don't want to make it too dramatic. I don't feel like it's dramatic in a way. I mean, it sounds pretty bad, but it was not because it's like there was no joy in continuing what I was continuing doing. So it took me about 6 months to come back into the field, and I ended up continuing working in veterinary medicine. But that's what sort of settled in my mind, in the back of my mind. And it took me about, I think, 10 years to realize that this is the problem of the profession, not me, and that there's the stuff that's happening with us after vet school and when we work long hours. And long hours is not the only thing that happens to us. That it's something that I think there's a way to figure it out, and to figure out not just from the personal care perspective, but I think we can do it systematically through management. So that's sort of probably a short version of it.
Yeah, a short version that I think many people can relate to. As you know, this is a hot topic right now. It's nothing new, and it's not unique to veterinary medicine. I really appreciate when you and I met and I learned about Galaxy, what I appreciated was how you were taking that systemic view and you were really seeking a deeper answer and a deeper method for resolving this? Because I know that I've struggled with this, is feeling like a Band-Aid approach is often what we use to deal with burnout, something topical that can alleviate the symptoms of burnout. But are we really fixing anything? Are we really creating a sustainable change? And from my understanding, that's something that you are aiming to do with having burnout prevention be baked into the model. For those people listening who may be wondering, do I have burnout? What exactly is burnout? How is that different than just being stressed out or feeling depressed? Can you share a little bit about your understanding of how we define burnout?
Well, I think I'm way less qualified than you to answer that question.
I'm even thinking actually from your research data, since you have a survey, which we'll be talking more about, what have you learned maybe from that survey data of what you found to be the causes of burnout, the parts that really,
Well, I think that the interesting thing that, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think it was Maria Holovichuk, who I deeply respect. She actually made that distinction for me between the compassion fatigue and the burnout. Is that burnout doesn't go away with vacation? Like, that's kind of like a simple way to think about it, is that you can't rest from it. It just settles in. And there's no solution. And then you're essentially in this dark place where nothing brings joy to life. And you're trying to do things desperately, trying to do things that used to bring joy. Like I had hobbies that I had before. I played badminton. I'll try that. That didn't bring joy. Playing guitar, that didn't bring joy. Then you start drinking, to kind of settle that. That doesn't work, or works, but very short time. So, it's just, it doesn't go away. And it's this just cynical, like no relationship with the patients anymore. You become really callous to what's going on with the patients. And, I think it's just nothing is fun, mm-hmm. and it doesn't go away despite whatever you do or used to do to have fun. And that's where I think the problem with this is that that you try to fix it with the things that ultimately you think bring joy, and it doesn't work. And sometimes it leads you to places with abuse of alcohol or substances, and sometimes to death that way as well.
Absolutely. It's a very hopeless feeling when all the things that used to work no longer work, and we're at such a point of exhaustion that we're not thinking about this creatively of what needs to happen to resolve this. And at the end of the day, there's a real lack of ability to recover. We are at the end of the day physical and physical beings. We're animals. we have systems that need rest and recovery and a variety of inputs to stay healthy. And when we're working excessive hours relentlessly, we're not getting what we need to be balanced. And that's where I think the structural component comes in of how do we really set up an organization so that people can thrive and maintain some sense of humanity in their work. So let's talk more about your journey, the parts that you feel relevant to share. Because to me, you had a very interesting educational background, the steps you took to learn more about business and the path you have been on that has ended up here at Galaxy, but there's a lot in between I think has informed what you're trying to build today. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I'm a vet by trade. Actually, I call it a double vet because I did my first vet school in Ukraine, out of all places. Now, unfortunately, everybody knows where it is for a different reason. By the way, shout out to all the Ukrainian soldiers out there fighting the Russians. And and then I did vet school in Canada, and then immediately after that, it was very interesting. I think that's where my first entrepreneurial sort of things started coming to the surface. When I graduated, I went to Russia back when they were less crazy and spent 3 weeks of the external rotation in Moscow doing surgeries. They had amazing surgeons there. And I learned that they didn't have a lab. Came back and just jokingly mentioned that in the lab in the Atlantic Vet College, and someone said, "Do you want to build a lab in Russia?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I just immigrated from that region, so why would I go back?" And in 20 minutes, I decided, let's do it. So I went to Russia and built the first diagnostic lab in the Russian Federation. And it was an experience that I don't want to repeat or recommend to anybody, but it was like a true sort of test to to kind of, if I want to do something entrepreneurial. And I think that in everybody's entrepreneurial journey, and I think this is one angle that makes me happy today, is sort of this entrepreneurship. There has to be some sort of event in life where you really go deep and fail somehow. That if you resurrect from that, then I think that your risk tolerance becomes much higher, and then eventually you're not worried about things that you can bump into as an entrepreneur. So that experience was quite interesting in Russia. So I came back, worked as an ER vet, burned out, as I mentioned, and then I pivoted. I was exposed to so many different workflows in the veterinary hospitals that I think I ended up working in close to 40 different hospitals as an ER vet and relief vet. And I've seen so many different workflows, and quite a lot of them looked inefficient. So I ended up coming up with a product called SmartFlow. And it's a workflow optimization software. So essentially it helps to streamline the ER work and the whiteboard, and then also it has an aesthetic sheet and so on the iPad. So anyway, it's a solution for workflow, and that was a big pivot in my career. But it was pivoted to business, and I wasn't trained in business. I was trained as a vet twice, and I was kind of trying to get away from it after 2 educations in it. So I ended up feeling a deficiency in business, and I didn't know how to tap into it, especially working really hard. So I ended up reading tons of literature. Actually, I took a job 3.5 hours of drive away from home so I could listen to business literature as I'm driving. That's the only way you can actually not fall asleep and listen to that much stuff because you're driving. So I quit. So that's kind of stupid, I think. But 8 years ago, I quit listening to music or watching movies. I haven't seen a single movie since then, just because I wanted to listen to more books. Ended up, so this SmartFlow, we sold it to IDEX, but as I was selling to IDEX, I decided to do an MBA, and it was in international healthcare management. I was trying to get a little bit more of a business acumen added to my portfolio. And the interesting thing was that we sold SmartFlow. We did really well through it. And I had a choice what I want to do. I was at IDEX for short of a year. They put me in charge of their software division. So I was a general manager at IDEX. That wasn't my cup of tea. They're a big company, slow kind of moving and slow turning. So as I was leaving, I was writing my dissertation for MBA. And I had a choice of selecting whatever I wanted, research and write about. And that's where it's sort of at that time I realized that the burnout is real in our industry. And I connected the dots. I actually never thought that my episode was a burnout until probably 4 years ago. And then I realized, I'm like, that's what happened to me. And despite how I call it, and it was sort of a point of failure in my life, how I thought about it, I'm like, this is something that's happening with others. So is there a solution? And everybody is looking for these. I like how you called it topical treatments for the burnout, because a lot of this stuff is the fixing the consequences. It's not really preventing it. It's more about, big organizations now. It's fashionable to hire psychiatrists or psychologists maybe to work for the organization. But again, I think it's nobody's seeking help until they know they're sick. So how do we prevent this? And I don't think that anybody graduating from vet school hearing about burnout, would be too concerned about it. So I think it's really an industry responsibility to create a framework in which it doesn't happen, so we don't have to fix it. And that was sort of in my mind. And I thought maybe other industries figured it out. And the closest to us is obviously human healthcare. So I went there and spent a little bit over a year in different big hospitals, and I learned about lean thinking. So that's something lean. Some people know it from manufacture, so Ford or Toyota. And it's essentially improving the operations through eliminating waste. But as they modified it in human healthcare, I found a mentor, actually, John Tesson, and he created an organization where they implemented lean thinking principles into the organizations, and that seemed to help, and it was really sticky. And one most important principle was to respect the people that do the work, which really stuck with me out of all the principles that they had. And it's essentially the executive management and all the layers of management are really trying to understand what the frontline workers are doing. And frontline not meaning receptionists, meaning the nurses, the doctors in the hospital. What their day looks like? What do they need to fix little problems, little pebbles in their shoes, and how to make them happier? And it's not about creating great vision and mission and color of the uniform. It's very simple. Let people fix their own problems. Mm-hmm. Very, very simple. And I became passionate about it. So I wrote a dissertation that was essentially hypothesizing, can we take what they've done in healthcare and apply it to veterinary medicine? Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to research that. That's when we kicked off the practical portion was we did the survey. At that point I did the survey in our domain, and we collected, I think, close to 1,500 respondents. We used Professional Fulfillment Index developed in Stanford, and it's essentially a tool similar to BMI, I think, is a standard for burnout. And we did the slice, and my main thing was first to understand, is the industry burned out? We hear about it a lot, but maybe it's like a shark attack. Mm-hmm. There's a shark attack and everybody hears about one, but it happens once in the blue moon. But no, we are burned out, and that's what the study showed. And and it showed that the techs are more burned out than the vets, and which people didn't really pay attention to because it was all about the vets, which kind of irritates me too. And it was a lot of interesting stuff. So we actually repeat that every year. And right now, I want to do a shout out here. And then we are in the third year of this survey, and we're measuring it in the industry, and we're putting different different slices of data that give us a little more information. And all we're doing with that is determining who are burned out more than others, and then how do we define those individuals. And then how do we find out what triggers of burnout are more significant? And then we think backwards to think, what can we do in management to prevent this trigger to be triggered? And there's classic triggers of burnout. Maslow defined them in 80s, I think, and there's 6 of them. And that's our kind of basis for our current methodology of burnout prevention. But there's more and more that we uncover through this survey. So if you're listening to this and we're still doing this survey, please go ahead and fill it out.
So that will be linked up in the show notes. And I really encourage everybody to click on that link. We need the data from as broad a swath of people as we can get. So if you're in the vet med profession and you're a technician, you're a doctor, you're an owner, we would like to know your perspective on this. So please do click on that link. It's all there for you. Just click on the show notes. So what have you found from the previous surveys? And how's that informed you right now with Galaxy?
Yeah, so the main thing was, and it was a parallel, it was a parallel sort of finding out little things along the way and then still addressing those 6 triggers, which I want to talk about them. But what we found was very interesting to me is the age. So it turns out that the veterinarians that are younger burn out more than the veterinarians that are more senior. And it was surprising to me because you would think that, the longer you're in it, the crankier you become. I have my own hypothesis about it too. I don't know if it's longevity. I think it's the type of people as well. I think that baby boomers are radically different people from millennials, and millennials are probably going to be different from Gen Z, Y. I can't remember all the letters.
The next generation.
Yeah, but I think that the baby boomers were just hardworking people. And if you'll think even the generation sort of before that, the industrial sort of, you have a job, if you have it for life, that's great.
Yeah.
And, I think now I hit the wall probably 10 years into it. And if I didn't switch to technology and then business, then I probably would be looking for something else because I think that's a component of it. And I think that everything you learn so rapidly now, everything at the tip of your fingers in the phone. So I think that it's just not sustainable to have this career for life to be, graduate, become a vet, and then die as a vet. So that's just, and same happens with lawyers, same happens with teachers, I don't think there's any more professions for life. So, so that's why I think that the younger veterinarians burn out, but there's a lot of other stuff that we discovered. So when we have little hypotheses that come along the way, we started to test them. So one of the hypotheses that I had was that maybe people that are younger, they essentially, when I look at the vets are in the best meaning of this word, are nerds. So they are people that are passionate about studying. And I just thought, are these people really passionate about treating animals, or they're so dedicated and love studying? Maybe that's a thing that they like, because there's so much to study. And for 10 years in a row, you're chained to the books and studying. And then with all that charge of kind of learning continuously, you graduate, and then you put in the exam room. And if you're in GP practice, then you start poking vaccines and talk about fleas and ticks all day long. So I thought, okay, maybe there is something there. So we thought maybe it's the goal setting that people had. And from positive psychology, we know that goal setting is one of those parts of happier life. So they have this amazing goal. And most people you talk to, they're 10 years old when they decide to be a vet. And then when they're 30-ish, they become a vet. So there's a 20-year, that's a hell of a goal setting. I mean, not many people are that good at hitting their target. And then when they do, it's over. And there's no next goal. It was just kind of like a purpose in their life, and they lost the purpose. So we did the second round of studies we combined it with the questions about goal setting. And it did show that people that have their goals set and sort of annually, quarterly, or how they look at it, they're happier or less burned out than the people that don't. So every year we're trying to add sort of a color to it in that way, and then learn more about how our study can slice it more and then address the points of pain. So this year, we're slicing it also by ethnicity, type of practices, large or small, culture, hospital culture, and stuff around the vacations and things like that, financial questions, and with euthanasia. One of the things that I'm strongly suspecting, that not just euthanasia, I think euthanasia could be a very compassionate act and help with the owner, but specifically economic euthanasia. I think that is really a big trigger for us. And
can you define that? Because some people may not know what that means.
Killing for money. For the lack of a better word, because essentially we're the only profession, and this is kind of crude, but we're the only profession where the client can't pay, we murder the client. Like, this is the pet that we essentially euthanize because you can't pay. And I think, when I was in my sort of, burnout time, I remember I was just thinking about euthanasia, and I decided to just count how many approximately pets I've euthanized since I graduated. And with the amount of shifts and how many pets as an ER vet you euthanize, I counted about 2,700. There's no way that doesn't leave some sort of a scratch in you that then is, bleeding. Like, there's something needs to happen, or you become callous, and then I don't know. There's something to it, but the economic euthanasia is essentially when someone can't pay, and you decide that if we don't treat the animal is going to suffer. You make a sound decision that to end suffering, you propose euthanasia. But then what we get back for this as veterinarians, especially as an ER vet, how many times we all heard, you're doing this for money, you didn't go to school because you love animals. And it's just terrible what clients tell you while you're doing your best to help them. And in the most cases, you don't even work, like it's your job. It's not your decisions. You have an employer, and that's the instructions. You can't just say, hey, $5,000 donated by this hospital. So it's really a tricky situation. So we're trying in both this survey, we're trying to find out the association of economic euthanasia with the burnout, and how much people are burned out. And then also in Galaxy, we're looking for the ways how to lower the chances of economic euthanasia. And it's very multifactorial, but it's not just let's give money to everybody. There's ways to do it.
Okay. I'm happy to dive into that if you'd like to. I'll just say personally, I relate to that so much. And it was something that I found very appealing about your model. That's what ended my trajectory in veterinary medicine. So I was a technician. I was at NC State. I was a pre-vet student, and I'd worked in several different clinics. And this last one was an ER night shift. And there are just too many euthanasias that would come in of a person with their animal that needed surgery, and maybe the surgery would be $2,000. They couldn't afford it, and to euthanize was $70. And so that was a choice they would make. And there's just this one cat that I remember that it was my last shift, because I wanted to save the cat and take the cat home. I'm like, I'll pay for the surgery if I have to. But of course, the practice had rules in place that would not allow that. So we were not allowed to intervene. We had to do what the client wanted, and the client opted for euthanasia for an animal that just had a broken leg. And I just, that was the end. I can really relate to the compassion aspect of it. And I could feel that I wasn't cut out to continue doing that. So I took a break and reassessed my path. And I wonder about how many veterinarians have experienced this, where it does lead to that really dramatic compassion fatigue that can derail them from their career and from really taking care of the animals in the way they would like to be able to take care of them. And so I know into your model, you've built in some aspects that help relieve that type of difficult decision making or being put in that position that really is an impossible position. So let's keep going along that track, and also how you have evolved your model to give employees more of that incentive to feel more engaged and like they take ownership over their practice.
Well, let's wrap up on the euthanasia stuff, and then we can switch to that. It is a component. So with the economic euthanasia, I think a big factor is essentially in how we're compensating our veterinarians, and that actually is another reason. There's a couple of reasons to compensate them differently, but what I think is that because our system is designed in a way, whether it's one network or not one network, usually as a GP, you have a pet, and then let's say you're belonging to either a corporate or, you have the targets to hit, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then essentially you're treating the patient, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, even if you say you're not thinking about it. And I know that many vets argue about it and they say, I never think about the monetary, component, but you do. If you know that you're getting 21% of commission, you know that every time you charge an x-ray, 21% is going to go to your pocket, despite of how ethical you are. It's there. And what, for that reason, or for the reason because there's targets set, at the GP level, when you're treating the patient, you're basically squeezing them as much as you can. And then you send that patient once either you're closing or you have to send them on emergency, or you discovered something that requires more intensive care, then you send them to ER, where when they receive the case, the client doesn't have money anymore. And they can run immediately into a situation. If you spend, $1,500 or $2,000 in the first location, you go to ER, you pay $175 to just be seen there. And then beyond that, ER vet has the same thing, the same mandate. You have to hit the targets. You're on commission, and then therefore they squeeze the client as much as they can. And then if the patient survives through that, then if it requires specialty, then you go to specialist. And then how many times as an ER vet I heard from specialists, ER spend all the money. And then they need to charge. So we are squeezing the customer along the way, every step along the way. And we're thinking about how we're going to, we're not thinking about the whole care. So in the galaxy that's healthcare system, that's why we call it healthcare system, we are deviating, we're going away from the commission-based pay. And there's a very important component to it. There's another psychological one that makes people happy, and we'll talk about it. But the first one is that if you're thinking only about the health of the patient, and if you're thinking, okay, this patient might do better at the emergency, then you send it to an emergency hospital that is also within the same system, within the same network. And then if needed, it's sent then to a specialist. Then it's sent when the patient requires it, not when you spend all their money. And essentially, this whole chain is then thinking about the level of care and the quality of care rather than how much the client was squeezed. But at the end of the day, if you're one network, you will extract the value for treatment of this patient as much as you would if you were not doing this. So essentially, I think that commission-based pay is what's driving the economic euthanasia as one factor. I mean, the prices for vet care are high enough, and if people bought insurance, it would be better. But I think that eliminating commission-based pay would really help us to drive away from economic euthanasia. We also have the non-for-profit that is a part of it. And if you're a large enough organization, you can have non-for-profit and separately raised funds and actually pay for services rather than donating money to people that can't pay for it. But your nonprofit can do it, or you can pay or do procedure and then charge nonprofit for it. And then nonprofit can raise funds. And if you are qualified through the 503, I think it's called C, then you can also write it off. So there's a lot of economic instruments that you can do around it, but I think the commission-based pay is sort of the starting point.
Yeah, that's I recently had a veterinarian that I work with ask to be asked for that model for herself because she was on commission and she was noticing that it would drive her stress levels so high, and even the way she would interact with her team was more cutthroat because she wanted to say, "I'm going to get that commission in my department and for my income, or I need to work extra hours and push my techs to be here extra hours so I can make the amount I need to live." So moving away from that, I think decreases a lot of that drive for the economics that affect the clients, as well as how that may affect your team.
And you have a different conversation with the client and with your team. I remember I've done tons of locums or relief shifts. And I remember one day we decided to do an exploratory. And then I heard behind my back, one of the technicians say, "Oh, Ivan is going to get rich tonight." I almost puked how disgusting that was for me, because it was just at that moment, and I wasn't on commission because I worked the first year in my practice out of 12 that I've been doing vet medicine. I worked on commission, and I said, I'll never do it again in my life. And whenever I had a client losing their marbles in my face saying, "You're doing this for the money," I could entire career say, "If you leave right now, I'm going to go lay down and earn as much as if you're staying with your pet, because I'm on an hourly pay." Mm-hmm. And that would keep my sanity to a degree. But I think that's very important, and it's a different dynamic. And then if you, again, in Galaxy, we all own shares, technicians, receptionists, everybody. Then if doctor is pushing the technicians more, it's not because doctor is going to make more money, or technicians are pushing doctors, because they're all the team and accountable to each other, because we're all shareholders. It's a completely different mindset of the employee ownership and the owner's mindset, which is one of the 4 values in Galaxy, compared to, this doctor is taking on all of these cases or prescribing more blood work because they're getting commission.
So let's talk about that, because this may be completely novel for some people listening. They don't even know what this language means. So when I introduced you, I had mentioned that this healthcare system you're designing is co-owned by its employees. So I don't know if we can use this as an example. What I propose is, let's say I own my veterinary practice, Crystal, and I have a team of 15 people. And I'm interested in Galaxy, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what would happen if we joined Galaxy? If our team of 15 came on board with you, is that a reasonable way to enter into this as an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that is important, we developed a model that, let me backtrack it. Mm-hmm. Right now, everybody knows about the shortage of veterinarians and the technicians. And I was we were trying to find out the solution to how do we attract more people to join us and to stay with us. And one thing is through partnership or acquisition of the hospital. Another one, how do we become an employer of choice? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I noticed is that the hardest thing for veterinarians when they're selling their practice is to actually tell their team that they sold the practice. Because in my mind, if I work for someone, I just went through an interview with this person, or I worked with them for 5, 10, 15 years. And then all of a sudden this person comes in and says, "Hi, I found this wonderful new home for all of you in this organization." And the feeling is that you're betraying them, because everybody knows that you're going to get paid really well right now. And a lot of this effort to build this practice was built on their backs. And technicians, the doctors, and everybody else, they participated in your success. You're the only one benefactor. So I think that a lot of veterinarians feel that. And we find tons of veterinarians that didn't go through the sale, even during this frenzy of multiples that is out there, because they couldn't tell their team. So what we found, the idea was, can we give a veterinarian who is partnering with us a different language, where they will say, "Hi, I'm staying. I'm partnering with a group called Galaxy Vets. So eventually I'll be leaving the business, but for the next 5 years, I'm staying here. I'll be still your leader. And by the way, all of you got equity in Galaxy Vets." How wonderful is that? How different that message is. Because the most worrisome part for every seller that we talk to is to tell their staff. And then now that we're working with the sellers, this is one of the most exciting things in the whole transaction. They can't wait to tell their staff that I just did something that gave all of you peace in what we've created here together, without actually hitting the notebook of the seller. himself or herself. And it's it's interesting. Tom Robbins recently sold, I think he sold. So we've chosen an instrument called ESOP. It's Employee Stock Option Plan. This is exactly how you do it. And then that's what Tony Robbins did. He sold his company to ESOP, which is technically to his staff. And the media was all over it. They were saying that he gave his company to his employees. No, he didn't. He sold it, but it's a wonderful instrument because in 1986, when the Congress came up with this, it's essentially an instrument where you can still sell your company, you can still get the proceeds from it, and then your staff becomes the co-owner of the enterprise. So that's what it is. So if you, Crystal, sold your hospital, all your 15 employees would become partners, and then we can have completely different conversation. If I'm having a conversation with technicians and saying, look, we need to see 3 patients per hour, not 2, then when a technician is looking at me, they understand that you own this business and I want to have lunch. So between us, we have completely different set of problems. But now if you are the owner and I'm the owner, we can talk to each other like partners and say, look, if we can push another patient here, and then essentially I'll take lunch after that, like we can have a conversation as equal, not just like I'm a boss and you're paid rate, and then, we have different agendas.
Yeah, we're in it together. We're all in it. We all want this company to succeed. We want what's best for our patients, and we want our team to be successful and healthy. Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, though. So let's say, all right, this all sounds really good. It actually sounds too good to be true. So let me think. I'm a veterinarian, and we're thinking of joining Galaxy. And we know now that we're going to be shifting, if we were to join, to non-commission-based pay. So the skeptic in me says, I bet I'm going to be making a lot less. That, we're going to have this wonderful culture and we're all going to be pulling together, but we're going to be making 50% less money. Can you speak to that fear?
So not only that, as a seller, you also could be thinking, am I going to get less money? And is my equity given to my employees? So the seller is paid as much and actually more with us in many cases than with any other consolidator. With the non-commission based pay, so it is still in design. So what you hear right now is not really fully baked, but we became passionate about the topic of essentially paying the top of the market. And you can match the salary. And these are all things that I'm throwing out there. We're designing this right now. But let's say you're coming in and you're saying that I want to be on commission because I'm the best producer in this hospital. So one of the things that I'm thinking of doing is essentially matching your best year. And let's mark it on the highest watermark that you have. And then let's monitor it and see if we're there. And if it's higher, then let's reassess it. But the main thing is that there's no continuous in the back of your mind, remembering that by prescribing this, I'm going to get this. Like, this is the disconnect, that confirmation bias. Like, you have to remove that in order to succeed, I think, in that economic euthanasia aspect. The other thing is, how do you get to the highest base? So one way to get to the top of the market is to just say, look, wherever you are, you've been working in this clinic, your best year was last year, let's match it to that and let's make that your salary. Mm-hmm. The other way to do it is, we all became passionate about a book called Rules of No Rules. So it's a Netflix management methodology. They actually documented everything they do. And one of the things they do, they pay top of the market. And the way they do it, they actually match the offers that their employees get. So essentially, if anybody in Netflix get a call from Google or Facebook or Apple, the HR encourages people to pick up the phone and negotiate their salary with the competitive company, and then go straight to HR and say, I was just offered this. And Netflix matches that on the spot, which I really think that's the mechanism to do it in our industry, because in any industry, because people will shop. And if salary is the only reason why they're staying with you, first of all, there's many more problems than you think. But if the salary is what will get them to stay, then you have to match it. There's no way. And some people are trying to, find out in California, this is the average, but it doesn't matter. If across the road, someone offered me, $10,000 a year more, they leave. So I think, again, if we can afford this, and I think that by other aspects of our business model, we can, that's what we're going to try to do, just basically matching whatever people are offered. And it's very real. The other thing that it does, actually, it decreases the workload on HR. You don't have to monitor the market. The employees are monitoring the market themselves. Mm-hmm. So
fabulous. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very interesting. Okay, so let's also I want to just zoom out for a moment. I'm trying to imagine my audience, veterinarians, owners, and technicians that listen to this podcast. What else would you like to share with them so they can fully grasp the Galaxy model? And again, like you said, this is in development right now, so this is where it's important to have these conversations as you continue to develop the model, unfold it, have people who are interested sharing what they are looking for. What do you want people to know that we have not already covered about Galaxy?
I had a wonderful conversation yesterday with a vet in Vermont, and he was interested in how we think about things. And I think that the most important that we have, and that's the starting point, we have a purpose. And as much as it sounds like, one of those things that CEO would talk about, it's very important, because I don't know if any of the consolidators on the market actually have a purpose. If you'll ask them, they probably have something written in their, HR book, and something written on their business card, and the mission statement and core values. But if you'll think about the pyramid of what people are trying to do, the pet owner wants the pet to be healthy. The vet wants the pet owner to be happy because the pet will be healthy. The vet clinic wants the vet to be happy working, so the pet is healthy, so the pet owner is happy. And then the consolidators that own that hospital want their investors to be happy, so they make money. So the interests are completely disconnected at that layer. The consolidators, no matter how they will put the statement on the paper, they never will have a purpose that actually true, other than making money and return on investment to your shareholders. So when we designed it originally, I was passionate about the whole burnout and can we fix it? And we said, let's start there. Every company needs to start with a purpose. So what if we have our North Star, whatever we do, whether it's looking for economic prevention of economic euthanasia, our employees being happier, or making more money? Which we do need to do. We absolutely need to create the return to investors, and we have a very, very compelling business model, which is not dependent on just burnout prevention, but it depends on that because we attract talent. But the purpose of Galaxy is to prevent the burnout in our domain or decrease it. So I think that's a starting point. Everything else kind of cascades from there. But if you understand what organization is trying to do, then from there you can build sort of the foundation and everything how to get there. So that's at the top of the organization. That's the purpose. And we have two missions that are essentially split to veterinary aspect. So it's returning veterinary medicine back to veterinary professionals, because it's taken over by consolidators. And it's a very unfortunate thing that's going on with our industry, because we're an attractive industry in extreme high demand. Everybody got a COVID puppy. Everybody loves their puppy more than they used to 30 years ago. And we just don't have enough vets and techs. And the industry is taken over because of this attractiveness. Is taken over by private equity companies that essentially want to do a land grab, buy as many as they can, and then resell it with a higher multiple to someone else. So we are hoping that through a couple mechanisms. One is allowing the sellers that partner with us to own part of Galaxy, and then giving part of Galaxy, huge part, 30% of Galaxy vets will belong to employees, just given away. And through that, returning vet medicine back to veterinarians. So it's very material. It's not just the story. On our cap table, essentially that's 50% of the company are employees and ex-sellers. And the second part is to provide access to care, which is right now, unfortunately, not available to everybody, not just through affordable care, but through availability. Because vets are not available. There's half of the country has 3 to 6 weeks out to book an appointment. So those are the two missions. And we decided to separate it because we are passionate about the veterinarians, and the whole existence of Galaxy is to serve them and create the environment in which there's no burnout. And then more sort of extrinsic motivators in it is the top of the market salary. There's no non-competes. There's no commission-based pay. There's equity in the company. So by joining the company, you're essentially becoming a shareholder. And then we have one aspect that I have to refer as soft to our investors, but it's the burnout prevention. I think that I hope that we have become some sort of a thought leaders on burnout prevention, because we're developing these strategies. And, last year alone, I think we published 85 articles on how to do that. So those, I think, are kind of like top of mind, and we can drill down in any of those.
Well, there's one aspect too, I was remembering from a previous conversation that we had around the development of these types of solar systems. So how a client enters into Galaxy and the journey of a client through the system. That was very interesting to me. If I put myself in the shoes of a veterinarian, kind of feeling that all the responsibility was not just on my shoulders to care for that animal, and the economics too of it being shared across ER, GP, specialty. I don't think we've really highlighted exactly how that works. And I think that may be very interesting to our listeners.
Yeah, no, thank you for that softball. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to be spacey and cool. So our regions are not southeast or northeast or Houston region. It's we call them solar systems, and essentially the whole design of that model that can financially support and provide all that equity to employees and everybody else. We had to come up with what's called growth levers and the instruments, how we're going to grow the economic model so it will support all of this initiative. So we have some non-traditional things, but all of them could be packed into the term vertical integration. So essentially every region where we start is vertically integrated. Once we partner with 6 to 10 hospitals in each region, we will build an ER hospital in the middle, which we call a star. So essentially it's a solar system with a star in the middle, which has a lab in it. So essentially we're going to do our own blood work, not everything, just plain vanilla stuff, not histopath or microbiology. But it's very simple to put the lab together. I did it in Russia, so you can do it anywhere. So simple lab that services that whole area. And then very interesting things that you can achieve from both burnout prevention, but also attractiveness to employees. One of the triggers of burnout is the redundantness of these tasks. So providing this sort of variety of things you do is very important. What in practice we decided that's going to look like, we're not going to hire people to a particular hospital. They're going to be hired to that solar system. It's sort of 20 to 30 miles radius around these hospitals. You can't really go far beyond that for emergency hospital purposes. But what we want to provide is to those that want to experience different practice. Let's say I'm passionate about ER, but I can't do more than one shift a week. I just had kids, so I need to be at home. So either just quit my job and wait until, my maternity leave expires, or can I do some shifts from home? So a very important component of what we're building is telemedicine. And both technicians and veterinarians can work from home. And then, so in solar system, you would be able to create your schedule around, you just mix and match. What that provides is that you don't have just in your region, if you're not a consolidator and you have hospital X in which someone left, you're then screwed because you can't replace that veterinarian. But if you have the whole system that is fluid and people are rotating around it, then you can actually replace with your own internal resources and manage your resources, not at the level of the hospital, but at the level of the region. And another very interesting thing that we're doing is we're getting the relief vets to join us, and you can still be a relief vet. But if you work at least 19 hours a week or 1,000 hours a year, so you can do more in a week and then 2 weeks not do it. So you can totally be a relief vet. But if you do that minimum, 19 hours a week or 1,000 hours a year, you're still eligible for equity in Galaxy. I never was eligible for anything as a relief vet. I was just traveling the clinics and had my hourly rate. So you could be qualified for that too. What also it creates, very interesting from the quality assurance perspective, we have an internal app. It's called UpMo. So Up Motivation, that's the short of it. And it's going to have all of these instruments, your equity. So it's not just like some number that is somewhere there. You don't know how much it is. You're going to have it at the, in your phone. You can look up how many shares you have, how many shares you're granted every quarter. And then what do they cost today? And if the company did something good, what do they cost now? Mm-hmm. So you will have that day-to-day connection to how much you actually own as a part of the company. But also it will have things like rate your shift. This is one of my sort of favorite ideas that we're going to implement. Essentially, when you leave a building, we will geolocate you where you are, and then it will, just like an Uber, it will pop and you will be able to rate your shift, just 5 stars, 1 to 5. And then because people will be rotating in different hospitals, if you rate the same hospital, if multiple people rate the same hospital less than 3 or 2 consistently, There's something in that hospital. There's either culture or processes or something in there that you can now go and discover and fix. And then vice versa, if you have the same veterinarian or the same technician visiting multiple hospitals, and in multiple hospitals, they rate that person as a 2, then there's something there. So essentially, we believe that it's going to be a live quality assurance of type of people that work for us, and it's going to prune the system and leave everybody behind who is passionate about what we're doing, our purpose, and the common ownership of it.
How fascinating. What I really appreciate about your approach is how data-driven it is. You've had ongoing surveys where you are trying to better understand. We all have assumptions. We all can make assumptions from our own experience about why we think these problems exist, but we don't know until we actually collect the data and analyze it and continuously, attempt new solutions to see, are we really having an effect that makes a difference? So these ideas that you have, I must say, I see you to be a lifelong entrepreneur. Just the creativity and the ideas that you're constantly generating and the forward momentum of what you're doing, a bit ahead of your time. Yet I think this is exactly where vet med needs to go, bringing the power back to the people, so to speak, putting an aspect of burnout is feeling lack of control, feeling like I can't change anything. It's always going to be this way. So why even try? By giving people back ownership, by allowing them to have a say, to rate things, to speak up and to say, hey, this is working for me or it's not, to have the ability to choose work from home or not, even to move about within the solar system to try out different things and scratch that itch of continuous learning and education. There's so many elements to that you're bringing to this that help alleviate burnout that I find it very appealing. I think if I were in the position of being a technician or a veterinarian, this would sound very appealing and like something that I would want to look into further. There was something you had mentioned, I think it was around allowing employees to sort of have their own, I don't know if it's something around projects or continuing education. There was something you had mentioned before around that. Can you remind me what that was?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Allowing people to control what they do. So in this employee ownership, one thing is, hey, you have shares in this. And it sounds very transactional. The employee ownership power is not in just giving shares. There's 2 components to employee ownership that you have to have. One is, well, you need them to have the shares, and then they know that they can affect that. The problem, I had shares in IDEX. When I joined them, they gave me options, and there was like a tiered thing, and it vested and accumulated, and I just quit without getting any of it because I wasn't understanding it or cared about it. The important part is that when you own a part of the company, you need to provide this sense of that you influence the value of the company. Otherwise, it will not work. And there's a couple things that tie together to that same approach. That's the bottom-up approach of the employee ownership, similar to Lean that I originally came through, and you allow people to make change at the level where you work. And it's very similar to motivation and how people are motivated. So I'll try to tie those 3 together. But in terms of the employee ownership and the change that you can create, it was, I forgot her first name, Davidoff. She's a specialist. She gave me this term that I keep plagiarizing. So pebbles in your shoes. Essentially, when you allow people to fix small things. So if I can fix the workflow that I'm working in, and I know by improving something that will affect my shares, that connection, it will really then create that affinity where people know and be passionate about continuous improvement. And my best example was in the Boston General Hospital, where in ER wait room, they had a sign on the wall that says, "Do not void before you see an emergency doctor." And everybody would urinate. They would go to the bathroom and they would not see the sign. And then every time they get to ER doctor, they would say, "Can you submit a urine sample?" And they would say, "I can't, I just went to the bathroom." And there was a Hispanic nurse that said, maybe people don't understand the void, because she says, what if we put the sign, "Don't pee before you see a doctor"? And then that was her optimization of the part where she worked. And then they listened to her. They created a sign. She owned it. She loved it because it was her personal sign. And sure enough, people stopped urinating before they see a doctor. And then so she owned this sign, don't pee before you see a doctor. But that's allowing people to fix small problems when they where they work. Mm-hmm. And that is fundamentally important because that is actually providing an impact. And you know that will impact the system altogether. So I think that that's very important. And you touched on the data aspect of it as well. And I wanted to bring this as well because many consolidators talk about burnout prevention. Maybe consolidators talk about our purpose is to decrease burnout and make veterinarians happy. And as I worked with consolidators, I kind of skipped the part between the IDEX and the Galaxy because I was a consultant. We were consulting consolidators. And one of the biggest things we were doing for them is metrics. And I'm passionate about the data and how you extract metrics. And you can extract metrics along the way of any process and then understand, measure, and improve on it. But in order to create metrics, I needed to understand what is of value to them. So what do you value as an organization? What is in your core values and what is in your purpose that we can measure and then give you as metrics so you can communicate to your investors and to your doctors that work for you and to the leadership team that what we care about is improving. Because if you can't measure it, you can't tell if it's improving. And I couldn't find it. And I was trying to find what do you value and what do you measure? And they were talking about the burnout prevention and everything else. And then at the end of the day, they were saying, we need to buy 100 hospitals in 18 months. Okay, so that's something we can measure, but it's not about the burnout prevention. It's not about the wellness of the veterinarians. You really need to buy EBITDA to show your investors return on investment. So I failed to find out of 25 consolidators we talked to anybody who would measure happiness of the veterinarians and something that they said that you would care about. So that's why everything we're building now, it's baked into the model. And then if someone has an initiative that they would like to improve. Let's say it's a receptionist who says, I think I can improve the workflow in the hospital and I can shorten down our appointment time to 15 minutes, every 15 minutes. We have an internal process and we call it a Galaxy way. And essentially, this is the process that puts you through an innovation process that has baked into it design thinking process. And it helps you to understand the problem, solicit the opinions of people that are actually involved, and then come up with a solution. And then once you have the solution before you deploy it, you have to come up with the metrics. How do you measure the improvement that you promise you want to do? Mm-hmm. And anybody in the company can do it at any level. We have this central process. It's called Galaxy Way. It's essentially an innovation kind of engine. And if you want to improve something, it's just given to you. I'm the owner of the process. I will teach you how to do it. And then you take your initiative through it. So we provide a lot of autonomy to people and then they can come up with their own solution. It's just the way we create these is through this Galaxy Way process. So that's kind of leading to those couple of things that I mentioned that I'll tie together. It's the autonomy. So 3 things that I learned from Daniel Pink, which is one of my favorite books now, Drive. You need to, for intellectual workers, which is technicians and veterinarians are, you can't, and that goes back to commission-based pay. You can't motivate people by money. In fact, they've proven from monkeys to children to professionals to many different aspects that you cannot reward an intellectual worker by providing them more money. You need to provide them with 3 things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And essentially, by doing this and allowing people to fix problems along the way where they work, we provide them with autonomy. Purpose, I described at the beginning. So we have the purpose and we all unite behind that purpose, decreasing burnout in veterinary domain. And mastery is allowing people to become better at what they do because they like what they're doing, not because they're paid for what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And essentially, this is the sad part about us in the veterinary domain. We all hate continuous education because it's forced on us. Mm-hmm. And I think veterinarians, be so passionate about studying, if you will allow them to structure continuous education beyond their graduation, it doesn't have to be internship. It doesn't have to be board at anything, but you can say, I want to learn ultrasound, help the veterinarian to set that next goal that they lost after they graduated the university. And therefore, you will have the component of goal setting, you will have the purpose, and you will have mastery and autonomy.
That would light me up. I definitely can relate to that with my own profession and just the hoops you have to jump through and the continuing education and being so rote. And also, I really like this, the model of any employee being able to raise or propose a solution, and then having a process where you can say, okay, let's consider this solution. Let's have you scope out the idea, run it by your peers and see if they all vote that they agree that this would be a good idea and that they will work with you to implement it. Come up with the measurements of how you're going to measure whether or not it's successful, and let's roll it out and give it a shot. And so for people to feel that they actually have some power and that autonomy to participate more fully in the purpose of this company, that's very exciting.
And I think we didn't mention it, that this process is actually digitalized as well. So everybody has access to what's called Idea Portal. Many businesses had it before, and it's the idea box that usually accumulates all the, dusty papers and then thrown out together with the box. There needs to be a system, because otherwise people throw their ideas, and when they're never implemented, they will just stop doing it. So we took the software that I previously used to collect ideas from the customers for suggesting the features. So we're using the same software so they can submit an ideas. You have to, like you mentioned, solicit your peers to actually vote for it electronically. And when it bubbles up among other initiatives, you could be granted the opportunity to take it through our design process and then take it out and deploy it. And you can fail.
Oh,
it's also important.
What I love about, and that's how we learn, right? When something fails, then we can say, okay, well, what did not work about that? And how do we take it back to the drawing board? Another part of this that I really like, and I think practice managers who are listening, their heart is probably melting right now, because often in organizations, practice managers become the bottleneck. So technicians, doctors, they all have things they need and they want. And who do they take that desire or complaint to? The practice manager. And the practice manager has so many things that they have to juggle from the operational standpoint, that proverbial complaint box or idea box is often the practice manager. And so it's not for lack of wanting to implement these ideas or to help their staff relieve whatever challenge they're experiencing. It's just a matter of bandwidth. One human being cannot do it all. And so to empower people to do it themselves and to solicit the help they need without having a particular function within the hospital be a bottleneck, that I think that would take a lot of stress off practice managers as well, because they are often looked to be the solutions person.
Well, not only that, a lot of the time, the practice managers, or in consolidated groups, what I found out, the regional manager. Mm-hmm. That's a sort of a mystified profession, which I was trying to unpack, because there's no education to become a regional manager. There's no, practice manager, I think you can't take the training now. But for the regional manager, it's very, very different from managing one hospital or 10 hospitals. And some corporates, they try to put a vet in that role. They try the practice manager to put in that role. They try to put MBA in that role. Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate part is that there's so much pressure that put on practice managers and regional managers that they can't not be essentially, they rely on them to understand the P&L, the financial aspect of it, all the workflows in the clinic. And by looking at P&L, improve numbers. Some of them have 25 under their management, fix all of these practices. So the way we did it differently, we actually consider the practice manager as well as the regional manager, they're just project managers. Essentially, what that means, in the organization in Galaxy, there's a number of instruments, so they're called growth levers, that we can apply to clinic to fix one or another part of the workflow or P&L or happiness in the clinic. So they're developed, and there's an owner inside of Galaxy in HQ, or what we call mission control. And then if the regional manager with the hospital manager can identify certain, let's call them clinical signs, let's say and I'm going a little more into financial, but COGS, like their inventory is too high, then they don't have to know this. It's basically there's someone in Galaxy that owns the knowledge and says, okay, we can help you fix this. Let me partner with someone in your hospital so we can fix that. So manager or the regional manager, they don't have to know everything about everything. They just manage the connections between the management and the people on the floor in the clinic. They don't manage each process.
That is really smart, because then you can just share across, again, this whole solar system that you've designed. The aspect of sharing resources makes it so much more economical and effective.
You're removing the bottlenecks. That's the most important thing, because as you said, manager becomes the bottleneck of the solutions. But if you can have the people with competencies beyond, and then they deploy to the hospital, the manager just needs to understand the capacity of the team, and the ability and capacity to deploy it. And are there any other tasks that they're busy with that will prevent them from being successful in both at the same time, which is, again, another huge mistake that a lot of consolidators do. They buy the clinic, and in the first 100 days, they apply everything they have in their portfolio, and then people leave. 30% of people leave after acquisition. So we're very, very focused on extreme unitasking. So people can do one thing at a time, and they finish it. And my favorite phrase from Kanban training, which, by the way, everybody takes the Kanban training, which is the process optimization training. It's stop starting and start finishing. That's sort of the motto.
Oh, yeah. You're speaking my language. Can I go back to, I used to live in Palo Alto, which was startup culture. And there was so much of this start, and nothing ever getting done, and things just dying on the vine. And you see it over and over again. It's almost like an addictive element to the newness of starting something, but it's really ultimately not satisfying if you're not completing. So taking things to the end, even if it was a failure, like you say, you try to implement a new process and you realize it doesn't work, by finishing it, you gather data, and now you know something that you didn't know before, and you can use that information to inform the next step. So being finishers is a part of Galaxy.
It's important. And it's again, in the process, the one that we set out centrally in the Galaxy way, you have very distinct things that are called definition of ready and definition of done. It also comes from Kanban training, but essentially, what do you mean by something is ready to be taken into work? Like, that's the definition of ready, and it's very clear on everything that we do. And then what does it mean that it's done? So when we set our quarterly planning, when we set our goals and everything else, we make sure that they're articulated in the way that you can tell what they are done or not done. Things like improve work-life balance as a goal. That's nothing. Like, I can live the whole month not doing anything and say I improved it. By how did you measure it? What did you do? Or it needs to be very well defined, and it has to be deliverable. So everything that we take into work, we help people to put it in the framework where it's clear what are the success criteria. So you can then tell everybody, this is what I'm doing, and it's going to look like this when it's done. And then when you're done, by the way, to make sure that things are done, our entire team every time presents the items that they took into work in front of the entire organization. We have a weekly town hall where people kick off, as well as show the demos of what they've completed. And that's how we connect, even in this virtual environment, continuously every week, and everybody sees each other.
Fabulous. So you can see how having organization and structures and systems makes a huge difference. And so much, like you're building on the back of giants. You brought in many names of mentors and books and people who have designed true systems we've seen be effective, and you're sort of stitching them together, pulling from different experiences and professionals and models that really do speak to the issues that we're seeing in veterinary medicine. And so I really like the structured and evidence-based approach to what you're building. And I'm really excited to continue to hear how things are developing. As we bring this podcast to a close, are there any other points that you didn't make yet that you'd like to leave our listeners with? And in addition, where they should find you?
I think we touched on a lot of things. I'm just very excited about people that are joining us and are thinking of joining us. Please monitor what we're doing, where are we going, in what cities where you are. I think we're going to grow pretty fast. And the main thing, if what we're talking about here resonates with you, then reach out. We had since last year, we had 14 or almost close to 1,500 job applications as of today. And that's without advertising. And we're keeping all the resumes. We want everybody to join us. We're going to grow rapidly within the next couple of years. And it's important that these things resonate with you. If you are completely fundamentally against the commission salary, and you're into commission-based pay and you just can't get over it, maybe not a fit. It's important. We had 650 hospitals that reached out to us and ask if they can join us. And only 140 of them are actually opportunities that we identified. Because we explain what we're going to do with these practices. And people say, well, I will never put telemedicine in place. Well, then it's probably not for you. And I'm very excited to say no to someone more than I'm excited to say yes. Because if we're selective about who is coming with us and they're all aligned around the same purpose, mission, and they like what we're doing, then it's going to be easier. And if we're going to struggle, then it's going to be difficult. But if what we're talking about here is interesting to you, please reach out to us. We're at galaxyvets.com. If you can spell my last name, you can find me on LinkedIn, but it's probably hard. You can probably find a lot of articles by Ivan Zach. There's a lot of stuff there. And follow us on all our social media platforms, because we publish a lot. Please join our survey. So the link will be in the show notes here. It's very important. We want to collect at least 1,600 respondents. We're close to 1,000, but it's very important that we're going to continue this research every year to make sure that we have our hand on the pulse of the burnout and then understand what are those triggers, and every year eliminate one after another one.
And what professionals are you soliciting feedback for the burnout survey from? Is it doctors only, technicians in addition, practice managers?
So anybody who is in the clinical environment, so from receptionists to managers to technicians to doctors, so everybody who is in vet clinics. So please respond, because we're collecting and then parsing. There's a question on your role, and then we're parsing by the role. We're parsing by very different data points. And if we find something significant, we'll publish it. And it's completely anonymous. So we cannot extract from the software that we're using who you are. You'll fill it out and we'll never find out. It's specifically anonymizing software. So it's completely confidential.
Excellent. So Dr. Zach, I would love to have you back in the future to talk, to just see the growth of what's happening and to touch base on where you are. And, as things are evolving, you're coming into more regions within the United States, how you're doing on meeting the people that are really aligned with this purpose. So let's plan on having you back maybe 6 months to a year and touch base on where you are. All this stuff we talked about today will be linked up in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about trying to spell last names or search him on Google. I really appreciate what you're doing. It's so important right now. It's perfectly timed. You're riding the crest of the wave, and I'm very happy to support your mission. And thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me. And for those that are looking where we are growing right now, Southern California is where our first 2 or maybe even 3 solar systems. So watch out the news. And thank you for having me, Crystal.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.